Record. Bismillah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Mind Heist episode 125. On this episode, I've got Muhammad, as usual. Well, it's not I've got, I mean, we've got.
We've got each other.
We've got each other, yes, we've got each other. And we've got special guest this time, Jalal. Assalamu alaikum, Jalal.
Wa alaikum salam.
So, Jalal, I thought you might want to, that kind of moment when, they win the Grammy or the Oscar or whatever it is, they always say, I want to thank my mom and this and that. I thought you might want to have a moment to say something because I think your son listens to the podcast, right?
Well, I'd like to thank my son for the amazing insight he's given me I don't know. I'm not very good at speeches, I'm afraid.
Okay, but got
not
in touch.
Not only my son, my nieces and nephews listen to your program. So this is a tough gig, as they say.
So, but we got in touch that way, right? Because your son told you about our podcast, I think.
Yeah.
And then I went on your podcast, which is Thinking Muslim.
Yeah.
Is it Thinking Muslim podcast, or you just call it Thinking Muslim?
The Thinking Muslim, yeah.
The Thinking Muslim. I always want to call it The Thinking Muslim, but I always remember that the website is Thinking Muslim.
Yes,
Then I get confused.
Because someone had already taken.
Yeah. you got to put that 10 G's down to get the domain.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the Thinking Muslim podcast, which, how would you describe the Thinking Muslim project before we get into like the main topic, just to give you an introduction, Yani?
Yeah, well, we started this project. It was a few brothers and sisters. We came together and discussed the need to have a project which engages with young Muslim minds, but also particularly young educated Muslim minds who have been influenced by Western modernity or liberalism. And so there are many aspects to our project, but principally we've got this podcast where we try to bring intelligent Muslim scholars and thinkers to discuss issues that are contemporary and impact upon the Muslim world. Like we got yourself to talk about the Muslim man and how, in relation or echoing the book that you're currently writing. But also we also rolled out a series of courses, which I think you attended as well, looking at Islam and liberalism. And I suppose the idea was to explain to Muslims, or to discuss how Muslims have been impacted negatively and potentially even positively, but negatively by the ideas and the principles of liberalism and contrast that with the Islamic principles. And I'm sure we're going to talk about the Taliban as we go along. But I think this is another example of where the Muslims are confused, but that confusion comes from a premise of evaluating the Taliban, which is a Western premise, and again, I'm sure we'll talk about that at some point.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, you've got quite a few different people on. Like every episode has a different guest, right? So
Yes.
You've ended up having quite a few people that they're big people in their area, definitely.
Yes.
There are some people. I just remember. I know you had Yasser Qadi on. I know you had Azam Tamimi. I know that's kind of what I remember, but I know there are many others I remember. Oh, he got that. Oh, he got that. Oh, okay. So, mashallah, that's good stuff. And what's your professional background then?
So I'm a teacher. I teach politics, and actually, that's in a way one of the reasons why I got into the podcast, but also the courses. So I've been teaching politics, international politics, UK politics, but also political ideas. And my experience in the classroom has taught me that many young Muslims come into education as blank sheets. I'm not saying Muslims who don't have an Islamic background. Muslims, they come to education with salah and fasting, and they may be very adherent to the basic prerequisites of what it is to be a Muslim in terms of their ibadat. But when it comes to viewing the world around them, evaluating the world around them, many Muslims come as a blank sheet. And so after a college and university education, the chances are that they may be Muslim, as one young Muslim told me who attended one of our courses, I'm a Muslim, I pray and I fast, but in economics, I'm a socialist, and in social issues, I'm a liberal, right? And he had no problem with saying that, even though there's a contradiction between those ideological positions and Islam, because I suppose we haven't been taught, or generation after generation for many decades or many centuries have failed to pass on those aspects of Islam that allow us to have a worldview, enable us to have a view about the world beyond just the personal worships. So many Muslims, especially, and again, I'm sure we're going to talk about this, Amin and Muhammad, but many Muslims, they fall prey to what I call a very sort of macho liberal project. And that project is to change their tastes and their sensitivities, and to turn them into Muslims by name, and even Muslims by practice, but also in terms of thinking, that those ideas that Imam Ghazali, Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, and the illustrious Muslims of the past, those ideas that made them who they were, those ideas erode over time. And I think that's a problem. So back to your original question, I came to a view that that if I'm going to add any value to da'wah, to propagating Islam, it's really showing the Muslim, especially the young Muslim, how one should evaluate modernity and how one should navigate some of these ideas.
And so you're a teacher by profession, and specifically politics. So
yeah.
I guess so. Well, I guess you have a master's degree. I know that already, right? What was that in politics?
It was in politics, and in history. That's right.
Oh, okay, and you're doing some work with the Sapiens Institute as well, right?
That's right. So alhamdulillah,
that's related to liberalism as well.
It is, yeah. So Sapiens have asked me to do a course similar to the course you attended on liberalism. It's a 10-week course. So alhamdulillah, it's quite a lengthy course. And the idea really is to address and critique aspects of liberalism. Online, that's right.
Okay, so we'll link those things, inshallah, like the podcast and all of that.
Great.
So, Jalal, one thing you said which stuck out to me is you said, this guy on your course, he said, I'm Muslim and I pray and all that, but like when it comes to economics, I'm a socialist, yeah? But I think even deeper than that, even worse than that, is people that are socialist in their thinking, but they don't know what socialism even is.
Sure.
You get it? Like, I think that's the most common type of situation where they're like, look, Islam, they think Islam teaches them to be socialists.
Yes.
Like how can that happen?
Well, it happens by socialization. We live in societies where the dominant discourse is liberalism. So liberalism is the principal ideology in the West, and the dominant contrast to liberalism is socialism. So if you were to attend a university campus, you would find that you would have liberal ideas that are swirling around campus, but also the critique of liberalism comes from socialism. So if you disagree with capitalism, if you disagree with some of the notions of a liberal society, you're likely to gravitate towards a socialist, because that's where the critique is coming from. The critique's not coming from Islam. There isn't really a strong thinking that is one can use to contrast these thoughts with. Added to that, of course, there is a project that I alluded to previously where, after 9/11, there was a concerted, and there is a concerted effort to change Muslims and to change the way they think. And that largely comes from the liberal state, whether in France or America or in the UK or beyond. And that's obviously having an impact on young Muslim minds. And I would say that even having a strong Islamic background does not immunize you to those concepts. In fact, I've met many Hafiz al-Quran, many good Muslims who've been through. This brother I mentioned, by the way, who said he was socialist in economy, he spent all of his years in Islamic education. He went to all of the good Islamic schools in London, and we're talking about very high fee paying schools in London with very good Muslim tarbiyah. Yet he did not have the ability to filter out these ideas, or at least to know what is iman and what is kufr.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's a problem.
It's like when it comes to like how to fast or how to pray, like generally, I mean, not every Muslim, but most Muslims, they know, okay, what did the Quran say? What does the Prophet ﷺ say, right? But when it comes to like how to treat those that, you know, whatever, they can't find a job, for example, how do we deal with that? All of a sudden it's like, you know, what did Marx say, you know? And it's like, I feel like that's a worldview, isn't it? It's like a paradigm thing of the lens of how you see the world, because the way, and we talk about this a lot, I think, on Mind Heist, which is the way you view Allah doesn't want you to just pray and just believe in him. Allah wants you to view the world through the lens that he gave you. Yes. So when Allah says, وَإِذَا تَنَازَعْتُمْ فِي شَيْءٍ فَرُدُّوهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ, if you disagree with something, then refer back to Allah and his messenger. So stuff like you know, how to treat people who can't find jobs, whatever, yeah, people disagree on that all the time, right? You have the typical Republican, like, just work, you know, just sort yourself out. And then you have the thing of like, you know, help them out and all that. But the default for a Muslim should be like, okay, what did the Prophet ﷺ say?
I suppose that it's because the popular arguments to these, you know, normative ideologies such as capitalism, etc., are going to be from those socialist thinkers or communist thinkers or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
And with Muslims being stripped down to really the deen becoming so isolated, it no longer is it an overarching way of life for a whole society anymore. It's actually very much you, yourself, and your family.
It's secularism, really, isn't it?
And the deen has been shrunk. So this is why the most popular things that we read, or popular things that we consume in terms of Islamic knowledge, are going to be the things that are very much focused on us as individuals. You know, how to worship, how to deal with your family, how to deal with your kids, how to deal with your neighbor. But as far as societal sort of things, then we've kind of got, this is why I suppose we have a blank slate, and then we automatically go, oh, what did Karl Marx say? Let's use that argument. That kind of feels Islamic. Or,
Yeah.
do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. It's type of secularism, really, isn't it? I remember Sheikh Haytham always says this, like, that is secularism, to say, for example, to say like, oh, like he said, there's some scholars or whatever, they'll proudly say, oh, I don't know nothing about politics, I don't get involved in politics, yeah? He's like, how is that not secularism? That's secularism. Yes. Like, the Prophet ﷺ didn't shy away from politics. What is politics? It's like how to govern people and stuff like that, right? So that is a form of secularism, to say, oh, I don't know nothing about economics, none of my business. When the Prophet ﷺ specifically said how to manage the market, how to do this, how, you know, Umar ibn Khattab, he had rules for the market. So he didn't have that attitude. So we have to be, consistent. We have to say, like, look, we're going to take our worship from the Quran and Sunnah. We're going to take mu'amalat, like how we interact with people, whether that's through the economy or whether that's through your, you know, how you treat your neighbor. Like, it's all the same thing, right? But Jalal, what I wanted to ask is like you're saying, okay, people come into university blank slate, or maybe even college or whatever, yeah?
Yeah. How,
like, these people, yeah, Karl Marx, like, dude's been dead for a long time, yeah? He wrote this long book that, you know, am I going to read that book, really, you know? Or he's probably written more than that, you know, Communist Manifesto or whatever. But how does this guy influence my mind now in 2021? Like, how does that happen?
Well, let's, if I may, let's take a step back and actually discuss what is liberalism, and what is socialism, I suppose, as you raised Karl Marx, because liberalism is a dominant ideology in the world today, right? And liberalism, it consists of a range, a host of ideas. And when I reel off these ideas, you're going to find that many Muslims will say, okay, well, what's so controversial about any of this, right?
Okay.
And that, in a way, is the problem. So liberalism believes in individualism and individuality. It believes in freedom. It conveys the idea that we should live in free, uncoercive societies. Liberalism believes strongly in equality. And if you think about the last couple of centuries, it's been really a fight for greater equality. First, equality when it comes to races and then gender, and now, of course, equality when it comes to gay and lesbian relationships and beyond. Liberalism is a belief in a small state, or at least an accountable state. There are some disputes amongst liberals, but the idea really is that the state shouldn't be this overarching authoritarian theme in our lives, but the state rather should be accountable and should have checks and balances so that the state remains minimum. Liberalism is a belief in capitalism, in economic free markets. It's a belief that the state should stay away from economic activity as much as possible, enabling society to actively pursue their interests on the basis of supply and demand and whatever the marketplace and the active marketplace. These are some of the basic ideas of liberal toleration. It was John Locke who many argue was the founder of liberalism. He developed a thesis, an idea of toleration, how to live together in society, even if you've got different versions of the good life, right? Now,
and a lot of those ideas you just listed, it's like hard to argue with them, right?
Right. Okay. And again, many of us will look at these ideas and say, well, okay, do we want to live in a society that's not free? Do we want to live in a society where the state, a communist society or an authoritarian society like China, where the state dictates how we live our lives? And so, in a sense, liberalism has become the response to all that is bad in the world. Now, the way we as Muslims should view liberalism, before we move on to socialism and how socialists view liberalism, is that, of course, some of these ideas we may have some connection with, right?
Yeah.
It's not as if in an Islamic society we believe that the state should have an impact on every element of your life, right? Neither do we believe that the state should be an intolerant state. That if you believe in a different religion or you believe in a different madhab, that you should be persecuted. So we have some overlaps there. In the same way, when we talk about freedom, liberalism believes in a free society, and when that woman stood up in the khutbah of Umar bin Khattab and questioned him on the mahr, right? She wasn't arrested. Umar's response was, you are right and I am wrong. The woman is right and I am wrong, right? This is a classic example of accounting the ruler. And when that old man stood up and when Umar radiallahu anhum said that, if I go astray, who's going to correct me? And he stood up and took his sword out, unsheathed his sword and said, if you go astray, I will correct you with my sword. That didn't require the secret police to come along and arrest him. Omar was very grateful for this person. So there may be overlaps. The problem is when we don't appreciate the nuances of those overlaps and just accept. So just to give you one very quick example, capitalism, right? Liberalism is a belief in economic free markets, right? Now, capitalism has created a world. We could have a whole discussion about capitalism, but it's created a world of haves and have-nots. It's created societies where you've got this bifurcation between the rich, the very rich, the filthy rich, and the very poor, right? Oxfam conducted a study a few years ago where it said 62 people have the equivalent wealth of 90% of the entire population. Oxfam has had to revise that because it's now whittled down to 42, and I think after coronavirus it's even slimmer.
Wow.
Economic liberalism or capitalism has created this world of poverty where there is not a distribution of wealth. Now, in answer to your question, and when we look at that, we say this is a really unfair world. But the only dominant narrative then that critiques that is socialism. The socialists come along and say, well, that's because the distribution of wealth is not in the hands of the wealth producers, right? Or the wealth is not in the hands of the wealth producers. And so one needs to invert that and take away and redistribute, even in a state-centric, harsh way, redistribute that wealth. Muslims
basically
embrace that. Yeah.
What that means is the reason there's the inequality, the such inequality, they're saying the reason for that is because the people that like work in the factory don't own the factory. Basically, that's
Exactly.
what I mean. Instead, the owner who doesn't do the work, he owns it and he profits
Yes.
from it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Go on.
And so when you talk about Marx and why do people then, because people can now see the inherent contradictions in these liberal societies. Right? It's open for everyone to see. I mean, if we were speaking 20 years back, in the heydays of globalization, we would still be under the misnomer that we live really great lives and we're able to consume great products, and that's never been the case in the world. Today, the world has moved on, and there is a feeling that this system just isn't working for us. I mean, great swathes of Americans have a very pessimistic view about globalization. Would rather turn the clock back, for example,
make
on
America
this project.
great again.
Well, exactly. Now, so we live in that environment, right, where you've got this dominant trend of liberalism, and then you've got this the counter current to liberalism. The problem we have got is generation to generation, we have not had the Islamic thoughts that help us understand this world and help us filter this world. Those thoughts haven't been conveyed to us. And so we as Muhammad said, we are blank sheets. The world impresses itself upon our minds. And many young Muslims, I'm afraid, have embraced one of these two ideas or a mixture of both because of just the dominance of those trends.
Yes, I think it's called like availability bias, right? Like you just believe in whatever you have available in your mind, right? So,
yes. Yeah.
So basically you're saying the education system will teach you about capitalism and socialism because those are the dominant philosophies of recent times, but also because even like Russia can be counted as the West, right? So it's like in the Western world. So do you think it's just because the Western world is like dominating philosophy these days, or is that the reason?
Well, certainly so. And you see that in every media broadcast. You see that. So it's the same as, by the way, in Islamic society. Imagine, back to the days when we had, Islamic empires or caliphates, right? You would find that if you lived in those societies, even if you were not a Muslim, the thoughts of that society would impress upon you on a daily basis, because that's the nature of ideological societies, I suppose, where you are impacted even if you're not consciously seeking those ideas. And in fact, as we know, in classical Islamic thinking, da'wah was the idea of living in Dar al-Islam and living a life which makes you closer to Islam by seeing the justness and the greatness of Islamic dealings, right? Now we have the same challenge as Muslims living in the world. By the way, even if we live in Muslim countries, living in societies which the dominant imprint on those societies is liberalism. You live in Turkey, and liberalism has, of course, had a very strong impact on the Turkish mindset. Until today, you've got large numbers of Turks, possibly even half the population, who in some shape or form embrace these tenets of liberalism that I've outlined. And these are Muslims who just a century prior lived, or century and a half prior, lived in an Islamic governance, who didn't think like that, right? So something has moved rapidly or quite radically in the Muslim mindset.
One thing I debate sometimes with people, is because I've done a master's degree, and then a lot of my family, like uncles, they're like, got to do PhD. Like, what's your life worth if you did masters and then you didn't do PhD? Yes. And even like my sister, she was like gonna do PhD, and I was debating this topic of going like into academia and like how important is academia and all of this, and it's like all theory and this and that, right? And like, okay, you want to do dawah, you want to do like good in the world, how are you going to do that by like just sitting in a library all day, right? But then one day it hit me that these people like John Locke and Hobbes and Karl Marx, They were in the library. Yeah. So how is it that, from my perspective, they're just in theory world, right? But somehow their theories made it to our everyday thinking. How did that happen? Is it that some rich guy or the government or someone decided they want to push their ideas, or what is it?
Well, that's a really interesting point. I mean, if we look at John Locke, John Locke comes along in the 16th, 17th century, right? He comes along and he develops some ideas, and then after him, some philosophers come along and add and subtract and debate those ideas. These remained ideas in books. I mean, they were actually very fringe ideas in Europe for a period of time. But of course, they set into motion what we now know as the Enlightenment. The dispensing of religion as the dominant force in Europe, because Catholicism, of course, held people back in terms of reason and ration. And so what you have is you have this Enlightenment, where for a century and a half, philosophers are given free rein to debate and discuss ideas, right? But even that was very academic and theoretical, because
probably the average person had no link to that, right?
Well, exactly. And the average person remained deeply religious and deeply skeptical of anything which is beyond religion. The impact came really in the 18th century with the revolutions in America and France, of course. And those revolutions brought those ideas into state. These governments now were liberal governments in a general sense, right? They reflected those values of those philosophers, and so now you had whole societies that embraced the ideas of equality and the ideas of freedom, the ideas of toleration in liberal terms.
Okay. Yeah.
And so today we would say that there isn't a single state in the Western world which we can't describe as a liberal state, right? They may have shortcomings when it comes to liberalism, like Hungary, for example, but their general approach to law and order, to thoughts, to ideas are the concepts of liberalism. Even Russia and China, these states are deeply authoritarian states, so they've not chosen to embrace democracy, which is one of the sort of the ruling aspect of liberalism. But these states have embraced capitalism, albeit sometimes with state intervention, like China. So we would say that China is in many ways what China is today is a state-controlled capitalist country. It's a state which believes in its a la carte liberalism. It's taken some aspects of liberalism and embraced
pick and mix.
Pick and mix, that's right.
So what you're saying is that average people in Europe back in the day, they were religious people. They didn't have any proper interest in secularism per se or liberalism.
Yeah.
What happened was, I don't know the true details. You probably can help me here. But in France, for example, there was a general feeling that the church is messing stuff up. They're somehow getting in the way. This idea probably spread amongst the average people. And obviously average people, they don't care about academics and philosophy, but they care about eating. They care about being able to do X, Y, Z, right? And so when the revolution happened in France and the government that came into power were secular and liberal, then the people are like, yes, okay, so you got rid of the church that was holding me back from X, Y, Z, and now you're telling me all these nice sounding words, freedom and this and that. So they accepted them, and then that gave the government the power to then further push these ideas. Is that correct?
Well, in a sense, yes. And it took some time. Of course, these were deeply religious societies, but the transition took many a year. For example, slavery remained in place for a century and a half after the Declaration of Independence in America in the late 18th century. But what you have now is you have this idea which is snowballing, which is rolling down a hill, and as generations move on, The new generation is embracing these ideas with a greater amount of zeal, right? In the same way, if we think about, I mean, it's not too dissimilar to Islamic history. You know, Islam came and it was very small, and it was embraced by, you know, a small number of people. By the way, people who were on the fringes of society, right, initially embraced Islam. Very few of those early Muslim converts amongst the Sahaba were from the higher stratas of their society. But that snowballed and that embraced, and it was only really, why do we say, I mean, we're talking in the month of Muharram. What is it about Muharram that makes us what is it that signifies the first of Muharram? It's the Hijrah.
Yes.
When Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu was thinking about setting the calendar, he didn't go back to the revelation, the beginning of the revelation. He didn't go back to the birth of the Prophet ﷺ. Instinctively, he went back to the Hijrah, because the Hijrah was the moment when Islam was given strength. In other words, when there was a government, there was a state, right? And that state now had, you know, according to some of the classical books of Seerah, there was a split between the Muslims and the non-Muslims in Medinan society. It wasn't a dominant Muslim, you know, only the Aus and Khazraj, or elements of them, that embraced Islam. But because of government, that's really the strongest impact on these ideas. That's what allows these ideas to spread. And that's the same with the revolutions in Europe.
I'm shaking right now because because so many of the episodes, by the way, that we talk about whatever different challenges, whatever this and that, and we always come back to the idea of individual change is what will change things, you know, what will improve things. You know, لا يغير الله ما بقوم حتى يغيروا ما بأنفسهم, right?
Yes.
We always go back to that. However, what you're saying is no. Well, I'm taking assumptions. What you're saying is, like, these big ideas that are dominating today, they came from the state pushing it on people, not from the grassroots. So how do we interpret that?
Well, what I'm not saying is that we need to have some sort of, like the communists have this, you know, Lenin had this idea of the vanguard party. A small group can enforce their views upon through the bullet, right? Through the gun, can enforce their views upon the wider. I mean, when Russia became communist in 1917, what we really mean by that is that an opportunist group took power. The majority of people didn't even know what communism was, and it took generations for communism to really be embraced. And even then, it wasn't embraced by the vast majority of people.
Like but the examples you're giving was like the US, right? They won the war, right? The Civil War, or whatever. Right. In France, they, you know, killed the monarchs, cut their heads off, took over. And in Russia, they did a revolution. So, and there's probably other examples. So they're all revolutions, Yani, that push.
But see, you quote that ayat of Quran about change, right? A nation, ma biqawmin hatta yughayyiru ma bi anfusihim, right? A nation does not change, or people do not change, except when they change what is within themselves. And that is actually the prophetic method. So the Prophet ﷺ did change the ideas of those early converts, right? It wasn't as if he had this comprehensive view of Islam and then he gained a state in Medina 13 years after travail in Mecca, and then he enforced it upon those Muslims. Rather, the Muslims were with him. And what we learn from that is, if there is going to be change amongst Muslims, there is a need for change, even at the individual level, by the way. But that change has to be a change of ideas. In the same way, you know, I was speaking to a brother here in Istanbul who is from Albania, and his family lived under, you know, a very horrid communist dictatorship, right? Islam was eradicated. He said, I asked him, being the ignorant person that I am about tourism and traveling, as if I go to, you know, Albania, where can I go to the good Islamic historical site? He said, you will not find anything in Albania. It was all torn down by the communist government, right? But of course, when communism fell and Islam comes back to that society,
Yeah.
Muslims begin to review Islam and begin to re-see Islam.
Yeah.
But the generational link was lost. I mean, they say that parents or grandparents would know Quran, but the grandchildren will know nothing about Quran in Albania. Now, just to finish that point, when Islam came back, Salah had to be studied again from afresh. Fasting had to be studied again, right? Which is, really important constituent parts of Islam. But what hasn't been studied by the vast majority of Muslims, we are like Albanians in a way, right? in the fall of communism, what hasn't been studied is mu'amalat, right? Iqtisad, economics. So that has to be studied, that has to be embraced, that has to be. And so the change at an individual level is to once again see Islam as a comprehensive idea.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So there needs to be a change, but it's a change in our thoughts. And as I said to you at the beginning, I think one of the things that I feel, before we can even do that, we have to see modernity for what it is. And we have to be able to filter and observe how this liberalism and socialism, which we can put into modernity, how that's impacting upon our way of thinking.
So what I'm getting from that, actually, you've sparked this from in my head now. All these revolutions that I quoted or that you mentioned, it's all kuffar doing that. So the method of the kuffar was revolution, but the method of the Prophet ﷺ was actually not revolution.
No.
So our method, therefore, probably should not be revolution. It should be from within, from the grassroots. And
Certainly.
it's hard to, like, you could counter that and say, okay, well, these ideas and these countries that are now dominating the world, they did it through revolution, but has good come from it? Even materially, for the way people are living, has good come from it? No, you can't say that. So,
but then it endangers that mindset, that political sort of not opinion. What do I want to say? So if it's done by force, you haven't convinced the populace.
You haven't,
because of that, it's always endangered. Because
Yes.
there's always a population of people that don't want that.
Yeah.
And then you're always having to battle internally.
Yes.
However, if the population is already on board, then you're not endangering the system of Islam.
Yeah.
You may endanger the government, like whoever's ruling at the time, because they don't agree with certain aspects.
Yes.
But generally speaking, the populace still want Islam.
Yes, yes. And that's why, like in Egypt, when they assassinated Sadat, they're like, look, we're gonna change the whole country. They go, they kill the president, and then the average Egyptian's like, okay. It's not like the average Egyptian's like, yes, okay, let's do this, let's implement Islam properly. No, that didn't happen. Like, instead, as far as what I understand, what happened was, this group that killed Sadat, they used to call the government and maybe the police and the military, they used to say they're kuffar, okay, because of what they're doing, but the average Egyptian, they're like, they're not kuffar, When they killed Sadat and the average Egyptian didn't rise up, they're like, okay, now everyone's kuffar, So you need that level of education and this and that. And I guess that's what a lot of people have learned through the Arab Spring and all that, the average people, they need to have a viable alternative, and you can't have a viable alternative without at least some level of understanding.
I think this is why it's important for Muslims in general to really involve themselves in da'wah, not because they want to win the hearts and minds, but to also keep in their mind the reality of the majority of Muslim, the condition. Because what happens is, like myself, I speak to you every week, you know what I mean, and that's my bubble, and I've got my friends and they're my bubble, and that's my understanding of the Muslims suddenly, and the people I follow online are all practicing Muslims, and suddenly I think all the Muslims are practicing, of course they're going to want this, but no, when I keep the link with some family members that aren't practicing, or speak to people in general that aren't practicing, and then realize sometimes I feel like, and it probably is, that the vast majority of Muslims maybe aren't even in tune with that, and they don't really want that, and then that's that point that you realize, well, of course things aren't going to work out. We need to actually focus on what the demographics of Muslims are at this stage.
And actually, good example, Muhammad, you sent me that video of that man in Algeria, what he was saying about the fires and all the chaos happening in Algeria right now. May Allah help them. And actually, you're still raising money, right, Muhammad?
Yes.
So we put the link as well for that, inshallah, as well. My dad actually sent me that link on WhatsApp. He's like, is this reliable? I'm like, yo, that's Muhammad, man. I know him. So it's getting shared around and stuff.
Oh, that's great.
So, what was I going to say? Yes. So, what happened? Maybe you heard of what happened. So, there's a lot of emotion right now in Algeria, right? There are these fires going off. There's a lot of people dying from corona, etc., and without enough equipment and stuff in hospitals. And what happened was a guy, apparently, we don't know the details, but apparently he went to help out with the fires, but he was caught in some sort of suspicious context. And they ended up actually, the police arrested him, but a mob dragged him from the police's kind of custody, and they actually killed him, right? And I was just thinking, like, damn, like, Allah yarhamu. We don't know, like, whether he was doing something wrong or he was actually going to help. We don't know, right? I think it seems to be closer to the truth that he was going to help. Now he's lost his life, right? And it's a very big deal, obviously, we know, to kill a Muslim. So I was thinking, in Algeria we have this thing of saying Isaba, the gang's running our country and the mafia is running our country. I'm like, you guys are the Isaba as well. Like, that's gang rule, like vigilante justice or whatever, We feel that this guy did something wrong. He seems suspicious. So forget going to court, forget the police. We're going to take him off the police because police is Isaba, Our Isaba is going to kill the guy, And so this is another, like, real life example of what's wrong when the average person's not on the right kind of wavelength, But to go back to this, I think, Jalal, like, the list of things you were saying that we accept, a lot of us accept in terms of like, oh, tolerance is good, freedom is good, capitalism is good. So let's go back to that and translate that into like, okay, what is contradictory to Islam in those thoughts, like?
Right, so let's talk about freedom, because I think that's a really important discussion. And actually, it's always in the news, right? Especially when it comes to Islam, right? So, of course, Western notions or liberal notions of freedom, outline that we are autonomous human beings and we should have very few restrictions in our lives. If those restrictions have to be placed by the state, for example, there has to be a legitimate reason why those restrictions are there. So, for example, John Stuart Mill, a 19th century philosopher, argued that he argued for harm principle. There has to be a real harm, and what he argued was harm was, an impact on life and limb. That's what harm is. So intellectual, psychological harm for him wasn't harm. Of course, later on, psychological harm is introduced and other forms of harm are introduced, right? But the idea really is that you are free autonomous human beings and you should be allowed to say what you want, do what you want, without any restrictions from anyone, whether society or the state.
Straight away there I can see a clash, because he's defining harm as, on life and limb, and then even later if you add the psychological element, in Islam, we'd be like, well, actually, the worst harm is like going to Jahannam.
Right.
Now, so straight away is a clash,
Well, so we can say, for example, that, and as in the example we mentioned about addressing your political rulers, we know that from the time of the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba, there was an openness when it came to addressing the actions of the rulers. Think about at the Battle of Uhud. Before Uhud, the Sahaba asked the Prophet ﷺ, when he made a decision to fight in Mecca, is this revelation or is this your understanding, right? And he said, this is my understanding. So they convinced him to fight outside, right? So these are examples of where the ruler can be accounted or can be addressed, right, without any harm from the state. So in that sense, we are free. If you want to use that term, we are free in that realm. But are we free in an Islamic society to abuse the Prophet ﷺ? We're not allowed to do that, right? Are we allowed to? I mean, if you read Qadi Iyad's book on the Prophet ﷺ, Shifa, Qadi Iyad, I mean, it's one opinion. I'm not saying this is the dominant opinion, but Qadi Iyad says you can't even say something which is even slightly, slightly negative towards the Prophet ﷺ. He said, that person should be killed, right? If he says something against the Prophet ﷺ. Now, Qadiyad's view wasn't the mainstream view in terms of the things that he talked about, right? But we do know that in Islam there are red lines.
Yes.
You are not allowed to encroach on the sanctities of the religion, of the faith, right? And those red lines are very known, and Muslims and non-Muslims have to adhere to those red lines, right? So we have some restrictions to freedom, right? We have some red lines. Now, the West would say that you effectively believe in countries which are stifled, where creativity and thinking remain, because they're measuring it with the Catholic states that existed in medieval times, right, where all forms of thinking were suppressed. Our response to that is that no, the revelation tells us where we can exercise our free will and our freedom, and the revelation tells us what are the red lines, right?
Yes.
So, for example, in an Islamic society, we are not allowed to accuse a Muslim woman, right, or a woman, right? That's just not allowed, right, unless we have clear evidence. And as soon as we make that statement, the court trial will now be against us, or will be about our evidence. If it's against us, then we are going to be punished by the state for making a statement against a Muslim. That's a very high bar, right? That's a very, that is a very strict rule in Islam. Whereas, in Western societies, notwithstanding very weak libel laws, you can say what you want about anyone, right? And you can get away with saying that in different degrees in different countries, right? But you can generally get away with.
So basically, what you're saying is you're not free to accuse people of something unless you've got the proof, to the level where if you accuse and then you don't have the proof, you get the 80 lashes.
Right. Islam has very clear boundaries on freedom. At the same time, Islam gives us the ability to exercise, free thought and free thinking. If you're a business person in an Islamic government, you can be as creative as you want. Islam is never going to hold you back.
Yes.
Sorry, in that sense, right? But if you are abusing other members of society, then you will be. Let me take some water.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I get it. So, but what was that? I was thinking something actually about this whole freedom element that. No, maybe it'll come back to me. But yeah. So that's what I was going to say is that what we're saying now is like it's not as simple as freedom's good and freedom's bad, right? And unfortunately, maybe today especially, it's difficult to get those nuances across because it's like, TikTok gives you 10 seconds to get an idea across, you know? So that's a difficulty. But we got to keep going with it, right? In terms of showing them that, look, in Islam, freedom's good, but we define, what freedom, the red lines or whatever, according to, Allah and His Messenger, right? So we need to get that message across, isn't it? Whereas, in fact, you could probably go into this. Even liberals, they're like, yeah, we believe freedom's the best, freedom's the... But even they would probably agree there's red lines, right?
Well, and then that's where the problem comes with liberal societies as to where they set those red lines, right? In early liberalism, the red lines were very clear. You can do what you want as long as you don't cause harm to limb and life, right? Today, there are very many different interpretations of what harm is and where those red lines are. And so it is ludicrous, by the way, for France, for example, to argue that Muslims shouldn't be allowed to wear, the burqa and these sorts of the niqab and Islamic clothing, where the French interior minister, there was a case where a group of police officers, they asked some French women, just general French women, to cover up on a beach, right? They were wearing scantily dressed dress, and there was some complaints, so they asked them to cover up a little more. And the French interior minister had to go on TV saying that he apologized for that. Every woman should have the right to dress as she wants, right? So there are red lines. In this case, the red lines are you can wear what you want, right? So there are, and so
you can wear what you want as long as it's not covering much.
Right. So in France to abuse the French flag, and in America to abuse the American flag is going to possibly give you a prison sentence, right? If
Deny
not
Holocaust, Armenian genocide, etc. Yeah.
Right. So there are sensitivities. What they can't understand is that we have a different set of sensitivities to them.
Yes.
Right. Our sensitivities may be very different to their sensitivities. But I wanted to come back to a point you raised earlier, actually, which I think I need to supplement a little bit more, and that is that why is it that these dominant ideologies impact us so much? And that's where it's worth talking about soft power and cultural power. Now, let's go back to the Madinatul Rasul, the Prophet ﷺ society, and what he established there, because it was a highly complex, it was a society which wasn't just this basic, nomadic society where people came together and established this very, very simple state or simple government, but rather the Prophet ﷺ thought deeply about the impact Islam is going to have not only on residents of Medina, but also on the Arabian Peninsula. So, for example, we know that from the revelation that there were many munafiqeen in Medina, right? We later know about the names of the munafiqeen, and these were revealed to the Prophet ﷺ, right? When they were revealed to the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet ﷺ decided not to publicly reveal these names, and actually tolerated them. And when the Sahaba inquired, why do you tolerate these people who are sniping behind your back and undermining you? He responded by saying that, do we want the Arabs to believe that that the Prophet has arrived in Medina and has started slaughtering its people, right? Now, what we get from that is that the Prophet ﷺ was very much aware of the public opinion that existed in the Arabian Peninsula towards Islam, and to try to establish a favorable public opinion. We can't go into it, but if you look at the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, it is a masterclass, in soft power, in how to change public opinion. The Prophet ﷺ wasn't just a sort of narrow-minded leader,
short-term thinking.
He was thinking about, how do we create ripples for this message? Now, that's not too dissimilar to communism and liberalism, right? Liberals believe liberalism is an idea which believes that for people to embrace this idea, there needs to be a favorable view towards it. And the way that's generally done is for what we call cultural power. Why is it that Britain spends billions on exporting culture? There is an organization called the British Council, right? And it's responsible for conveying the British English language, but also for conveying British culture around the world, right? Why is it that the Americans, there was a subversive organization funded by the CIA, and they were encouraging hip hop, right? American hip hop on the streets of Algeria and Tunisia, right? Because these cultural artifacts, these cultural, outlets, they convey with them some ideas. Right? It's not as if hip hop is benign, or pop music is benign, or a
Hollywood, etc.
Hollywood, right? These are not benign. Benign culture. You can just soak it in, and you think that.
Jalal, what does benign mean?
Oh, sorry, but they have like a neutral impact.
Okay, yes.
You see, like they don't have an impact on you. They when they say a benign tumor, or a malign tumor, right? A benign tumor has no impact on the body, right?
Okay, got it.
And I think that's the thing. Go on, sorry.
Yeah, so it's like I don't know if you've read Neil Postman. What's that? Entertaining Ourselves to Death.
I haven't. Yeah.
Okay, so that's the whole idea of the media and the message.
Right.
So what you're saying is, like hip hop, for example. Hip hop is the the medium. Sorry, yeah, medium and the message. The hip hop is the medium, but it's not a neutral medium. It carries with it the message.
Right.
So even if you're going to make, let's say you could make Islamic hip hop, it's carrying with it liberalism. That's what you're saying, right?
Oh, potentially you can use, for example, Ertugrul is a I don't know, a counter cultural narrative to Western culture, right? So, but even then, it's not as if it's benign, right? It doesn't have any impact. I mean, the Turkish state uses Ertugrul to convey
Soft
more
power.
nationalistic, right, soft power goals, right? And it's to change, in particular, Arabs, to make them more favorable towards Turkey. That is, it full well, being a resident of Turkey, the amount of Arabs who have come to Turkey and brought their money to Turkey. Because if you go back 10 years or 20 years, you'll find that Arab opinion towards Turkey was very negative, because actually education syllabi all across the Arab world, to justify their nation states always talked about the horrors of the Ottomans and the so-called
what's it called, betrayal, yani.
Yes. And they're not true Muslims, and all of this comes out, right? You look at Saudi Arabia's syllabus. What Ertugrul has managed to do is cut through that. And yes, of course, it may have a general Islamic aim, but it also has a very strong Turkish nationalist aim. Right?
Even, I don't know if you know the TV shows, I don't know the name, but it's like Muhannad an-Nur.
Right.
Yeah, this was before Ertugrul, this is like 10 years ago. It was huge. And it's not Islamic, not historical. It was just, what they call it? Soap, that's it, It's soap, extremely popular in the Arab world,
I grew up with that sort of notion in North Africa of just loving Turkey because of all these soaps that were coming out there. Right. But it was mainly women. Obviously, women were the ones that were consuming that content. But even on Ramadan, there was like every Ramadan, that's what the shows would be. There'd be these Turkish soaps all about love.
And it's making me think, actually, we're just getting played with, because once, first it was Muhannad an-Nur with the Turkish thing, Then I remember going to Algeria, seeing the women watching Korean, South Korean stuff. And then it was Mexican stuff, and it's all like dubbed in Arabic. And so it's like, where's our own stuff?
And what undergirds all of those, so whether it's Mexican or South Korean or Japanese or whatever, what undergirds it is our liberal Western values, right? It's not as if Japan has a very strong soft power industry. South Korea has a very strong soft power industry.
K-pop.
K-pop, by the way, is promoted by the government. I mean, the government puts money into K-pop, right? Because they see it as a way of conveying soft power. And I asked my students, and recently, where would you like to live? Obviously, no one wants to live in Britain anymore because of Brexit. No places, except for Brother Mohammed in Brighton, right? Oh, no. Sorry, Bob. But I asked them, where do you want to live, later on in life? And a great number of them, which, by the way, I've never had before, said South Korea, Japan.
Wow.
Now, they've never been to these countries, but of course, when they go home, because of globalization, they're consuming the culture from these countries. But actually, what undergirds that culture, what comes below that culture, is those very liberal values I set out at the very beginning, right? Because liberalism has impacted those countries.
So what's another, we talked about freedom, what's another one where it's seems Trojan horse values, that's what I call them?
Well, let's look at toleration. Now, of course, Islam has a version of toleration. It's not as if we believe, in the best days of Islam, we tolerated non-Muslims, we tolerated different divisions or different madahib within Islam, and that was perfectly acceptable. And the tent is very broad for us, right? We know that to label someone a non-Muslim is a very deep thing, and it requires a lot of study. So Islam generally had this very broad tent version of toleration, and even non-Muslims were tolerated to very high degrees, and to the point where the Islamic way of, generally historically, the way we we devised societies was to allow personal law for different religious groups, right? So the Hindus in Mughal India, the Christians and Jews in Ottoman Istanbul, right? They were allowed to live according to their own personal law codes, to the degree that when Umar ibn Khattab conquered Asham and conquered Palestine, he called for the patriarch to come, so that the patriarch would, in those personal cases, the law would be the patriarch's law, right? The Christian law.
Patriarchs like the kind of Pope, local Pope kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, so that is the toleration that Islam has. However, right, we obviously have our red lines when it comes to toleration. There are some aspects, some things that we are not allowed to tolerate, right? And we have to be very very clear about this. So, for example, there are relationships, that modern relationships that we fundamentally have a problem with, right? And we, yes, living in a Western society, we ultimately know that the Sharia and Islam is not the code, and so we have to be respectful in the sense of, in our dealings with people. But we know that when we teach our children, we're not going to teach them that this is perfectly acceptable, and one should see that as a viable lifestyle choice, right? Now, of course, when parents try to do that, when parents teach their children across the West, they face, labels of extremism or accusations of extremism. Or in France now, they've broadened the term extremism to such a degree that when a khatib gave a khutbah where he only read out the last sermon, the khutbah of the Prophet ﷺ, he was sacked as an imam, right? He just read this out because in the khutbah it talks about the role of men and women, right? And the position of men, and that was against equality laws, supposedly, right? And so liberalism is encroaching on the Islamic concepts of social concepts of how we live in a family and live in our lives. For example, just think about how the value of the father in liberal societies, right? The role of the father has been so reduced, and so it's been emaciated to such a degree that there is no role anymore. I mean, the father is this blundering guy who on TV commercials can't even cook, right? And sort of when he tries to do DIY in the home, he's always knocking his thumb, right? That's the father, right? Yeah. So that status has almost eroded now in modern liberal society. It doesn't exist, right? Whereas in Islam, we have a very high, a very important status for the role of the father and the role of the mother, right? And they have very clear designed roles, and they are responsible for a number of duties that without them, the family collapses. I mean, I once met a very clever, very intelligent scholar who wrote a book on parenting in Lebanon, in Beirut. And he said to me, and again, I'm not sure if it's a saying of a previous scholar, but he said to me that when Shaitan wants to destroy a society, he starts with the family. That is why Lord Cromer in Egypt, in North Africa, he was the Counselor General in North Africa in the 19th century. When Lord Cromer wanted to colonize or further colonize or consolidate British colonialism in Egypt, he asked some scholars to write a book on the hijab and the need for the hijab, the unnecessity of the hijab. Hijab is not an obligation, and how the hijab needs to be dispensed in order for Egyptian society to progress, right? He deliberately did this because he knows that if you break the social fabric of the Muslim society, you're going to break society. Society is going to be next, right? Indecency will spread. The ideas of the family structure would no longer be important, and that's what we see today. Just think about, and I'm not immune to this, think about the Muslim household. Those roles have been severely reduced. Why is it that the son or the daughter today shows it's not just a basic disrespect, it's a very deep disrespect towards parents and elderly people in the community. That is now endemic, right, in Muslim communities. We have no respect for, we show very little respect for, because that comes from the concepts of freedom and equality. The idea that the son or the daughter is equal to the parent.
Oh yes, yeah.
Right. How dare the parents say to the child that you can't go out when it's late? That's
there was this like sketch on YouTube, and it's like having a baby in 2050, and the baby comes out, and then they like slap their mum, and they're like, I didn't consent to being born.
And I don't think I think 2050 is too far away for that type of dystopian society.
And that's extremely different to how it should be ideally for Muslims, right? Like I was reminded of in Saudi Arabia, a few of my friends who taught English in Saudi Arabia, they said the amount of respect they give to their dads is incredible. Like when their dad walks in the room, they stand up. They have to stand up. They must do that. And they said, we work out how they are with their fathers by seeing how they are with us, because they they model their relationship with their father, and they kind of mirror that onto the teacher. So when I walk in the classroom, they stand up. They give me this respect. They kiss my hand. They do this. They kiss my forehead, and they can tell that is how they treat their dad, and that's like what we're kind of aiming for versus, shut up, mom.
That reminds me of I had a friend who does chauffeuring, and he did chauffeuring for some Khaliji royal family, or really wealthy family, and they had like a big estate somewhere in the UK, and the sons and the father all arrived in their own helicopters, but the helicopters would hover in the sky waiting for like a particular hierarchical order of them to land that they had to abide by. Yes. So even in in the big bucks world, they still have to abide by those kind of laws of respect. But what I wanted to touch on, because you were talking earlier about how the blank slate Muslim would borrow ideas from other people just to argue against these sort of dominant ways of life, so to speak. But you've got that now. I mean, the big counter arguments for these ideologies are coming from like right-wing red pill kind of culture that is really being followed by a lot of young Muslims, especially men, when it comes to like the attack on masculinity. We are default going to those thinkers who are, whether they're psychologists or whatever. I'm sure there's plenty of examples we can give, but they're quite popular on YouTube and stuff, and that's the content that we're consuming and we're using and spreading, saying, hey, listen to this guy, this is what I'm trying to say, sort of thing.
And that's how you get the whole, this whole thing of the divorce laws, for example, in the West, and how it's rigged against men, and how Muslim men even maybe should consider not marrying, and all this stuff, that all comes from these thinkers. None come from Islam, does it?
Which is, so the problem, the turmoil. See, this is where liberal societies are tearing themselves apart. I mean, you've now got progressive liberals and modern liberals who are fighting one another on the limits to transgenderism, for example, right? And you see that all over social media and in university campuses, right? So, for example, Germaine Greer, she's a second wave feminist. One of the sort of the icons of feminism today is denounced by progressives for being, not a feminist, right? Because she doesn't accept transgender rights to the degree they believe in those transgender rights, right? So what you have now is you've got this, and so when you talk about, Mohammed, you probably are alluding to people like Jordan Peterson, right? Who's sort of the backlash, right? Liberal society has created these problems, and so these conservative-minded thinkers come along, and they try to take, I don't know, I mean, this is an exaggeration, but they try to take people back to a Neanderthal, a caveman type of, approach to masculinity. Forget it, and Muslims see that, and sometimes Muslims they look at some isolated hadith and say, here we go, Jordan Peterson's right? We should be like this, right? Whereas, a nuanced study of Islam, like a study of Islam, a detailed study of Islam, will find that, the early Muslims, they were complex characters, generally speaking. Of course, you had exceptions, and you had people who are that Umar ibn Khattab was a warrior, but at the same time, radiallahu anhum, he was very courteous to his family, and he was very kind, and he was very caring, and those traits can only really belong to a mu'min, I think, where you've got, because a mu'min studies Islam and changes. The hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he says that you will not become a true believer until your inclinations are in line with what I brought to you, right? So even your inclinations, even those inner feelings, those inner emotions of yours, should be changed and adapted to conform to the spirit of the Islamic text, right? And that is the type of mentality that developed in early Muslims and throughout Muslim centuries. I remember in Medina, I read in Medina at the time of Umar, radiallahu anhu again, there was an influx of Bedouins that from the Arabian Peninsula that started to, urbanization, right? They're seeing Medina is the place to be. It's a trading capital. Let's all move to Medina. It's Istanbul.
I was thinking that.
And so these slightly uncouth individuals, right, who haven't really had the sort of the learning to embrace the finest finities of Islam, the finest sort of niceties of Islam. They enter in great numbers, right? And the women of Medina complain to Umar and say, look, it's making our lives a little bit more rugged, right? It's not nice, right? These people are discourteous. They don't, so comparing and contrasting those Bedouins to the refined Medinan society, this is sort of a gentrified Medina now. People are far. So Umar responded by saying, well, fine, I will look into it, but have you seen these people in the battlefield? Right, like showing the virtues. These are on the battlefield. They've not lost it. They are the people who are ready to fight. For the sake of the defense of the land, right? I suppose my point I make through this is that unless and until we have an in-depth understanding of the text, the dalil of the hukm shari'i, to deal with economic and social matters and political matters, we're always going to fall prey to these dominant ideas and ideologies, which never will satisfy us, because Islam came to address the fitrah, right? Islam didn't say that earning capital in every circumstance should be rejected, right? The early Sahaba, you had rich and poor. In fact, if you think about the Sahaba, you had some who today would be regarded as millionaires, right, in the equivalence of their society. Islam never came to remove their wealth and to make them all poor, as socialism did, right? To create this sort of equality of wealth, right?
Yeah.
But the dominant discourse is one about equality of wealth, such that we forget, the Islamic economic concepts.
What about this then? Yeah, what if I was to say, you said like we need to know like the details and stuff so that we don't get misguided or whatever, right? But was that ever the case really? Like, even if you look at Muslims, right, Islamic history, did the average Muslim really know these details? Like, probably not, right? And they more likely, for example, when I believe it was during the time of Umar ibn Khattab, when they conquered Sham and they went on towards Istanbul and everything, Constantinople, they took over Persia, etc. Many of these people, they actually were what's the word, the Zoroastrians, or they were Christians or whatever, right? And they didn't become Muslim, right? Many of them. They were ruled over by Muslims, but they were not Muslim. And many of them were happy, right? Because the taxes are lower and this and that, right? More justice, etc. Eventually, though, they became Muslim. Why? Because of that soft power you're talking about. Because of, obviously, they saw the benefits of Islam, like even materially. But then they just saw like, okay, society's actually going a better direction, okay? Yes. And obviously with exposure to Islam and the Quran and this and that. But I just don't imagine that they like learned the details of Aqidah and this and that, and then they became Muslim. It's just that pure soft power. Like maybe they became Muslim just because they don't have to pay jizya or whatever, you know. So yeah, so
and there's no problem with that. There's in the same way, a migrant comes from Afghanistan to Britain. You know, the chances are that Britain is going to have a greater impact on the mindset of that migrant than his prior learning or his cultural sensitivity. So, and if not him, his children, right? He didn't go to school. He probably never studied at a university or a college and studied liberalism as sort of concepts that are laid out in a very clinical fashion.
Yeah.
But he embraced because he's consumed. He's consumed the world around him. He's consumed because he's got to live and secure his interests. And so inevitably you develop ways of thinking and habits based on that. Now, having said that, you know, in the early Islamic society, certainly you had that, right? So, for example, the Bedouin Arabs, even at the time of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, were of a different level to the Sahaba in Medina. We know that, right? And we know that in the Harb al-Ridda that these were the people who refused to pay the zakat when Abu Bakr became the first Khalifa, right? So we do know that there will be different grades, but that's because Islam is not a utopian faith. It recognizes that people are going to embrace his faith at different levels. Notwithstanding, some of the best scholarship actually ended up coming from Spain, ended up coming from Iraq, ended up coming from Persia, ended up coming from India, right? Some of the best scholarship we now talk about, you know, Imam Qurtubi, for example, right? Even Imam Ghazali, right? You know, these were people who weren't from the Arabian Peninsula, right? These were people who were from the outlying areas.
Yes.
Because inevitably, when Islam spread, those ideas of Islam spread as well. And you know, some of the best learning and best scholarship ended up stemming from those regions, right? And I think that's with any ideology. Of course, Islam isn't an ideology in that sense. It's not a we shouldn't call it that. We don't call it that. But it's in the sense of liberalism and communism. You know, there's a very similar feature we find. But those who embrace it and live within it, within time, become, you know, think about Tesla, right? You know, Elon Musk, right? You know, he is the archetypal, he's the guy, the exhibit A, the rock star of capitalist society. Yeah, he's a migrant, right? Because he came to America and he embraced that way of thinking probably to a greater degree, I suspect, than many Americans.
So how is Elon Musk like a bastion of liberalism? How does it show? How does it manifest through like him or his companies?
Well, we see that the dominant economic system is capitalism, and capitalism creates this culture where the only focus of one's attention is material wealth, right? Material wealth becomes the thing that occupies your time and yourself. Think about, I mean, you know this better than I do. Think about all of the productivity videos and books that you can buy. I mean, I always come across these at the airport. And always think about purchasing, you know, one of them just to see how I can become more productive, right? A lot of this comes from capitalism, because capitalism tells you that to be productive, you've got to be an economic being, you know, dog eat dog world.
Make cash.
You've got to make every minute of the day is about earning cash. Whereas, you know, Islam, we have a space for it. But Islam targets other values. Islam doesn't just target.
It's not the only thing.
Material value. Islam targets the spiritual value.
So according to the liberal way of thinking, that's why we say like a housewife is to be seen as low, because she's not making money, you're not paying taxes, you're not contributing to the economy, but she's contributing elsewhere massively, you know.
Yes.
So that's where that comes from. But like, do you think, okay, this is a big question now. Do you think like Elon Musk, right? Because he started off with his company, I think it's called X2, and then it kind of became PayPal, and then Tesla and SpaceX. Would he be able to do that in a Muslim-run society? Like, would there be anything wrong with that for example?
Now that's a very interesting question, and lots of scholars, much better than I, have thought about and theorized this. Can you make money in an Islamic society, and can you target? Can you have an aspiration to become a millionaire or even a billionaire? Yes, you can. Right?
Yeah.
There's no known hadith which suggests that the Prophet ﷺ, or even the practice of the Sahaba, was ever to tax wealth, ever to tax incomes, right?
Yeah.
Or ever to put a cap on incomes. Zakat taxes wealth, of course, right?
Yeah,
but it doesn't
income.
tax income, and neither does it put a cap. We're not allowed, by the way, according to the Sunnah, to put an arbitrary cap. You can only earn a certain amount, and then you've got to, everything above that you've got to give back to society.
So you're saying Elon Musk would be even richer?
I don't know about even
I'm
richer.
simplifying it.
What we do have is social responsibility, right?
Yeah.
Those billionaires would have a responsibility to their society and to their families, all right?
Yeah.
And in extremis, if those people were failed to give back and failed to show those responsibilities, then there is a system in place to punish them, to advise them, to corral them, to push them in the right direction, right? So we, for example, we know that Islam places a big emphasis on community,
Yes.
and on Islam doesn't say that without the state, the community should, because of individualism, whenever there's a problem in British or American society, the first port of call is the state. The state has to intervene. Someone graffitis a wall, someone, antisocial behavior, the state needs to intervene. In Islam, because of the concepts of Amr bin Ma'ruf wa Nahy al-Munkar, and other such ideas, Muslims should intervene, right?
Have
Muslims
a duty, yeah.
Have a duty to intervene.
Like, you remind me of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ when he told those people hanging out on the street, like, don't hang out here. And then they're like, yeah, but we got nowhere else to go. And he said, okay, if you're going to stay, then you need to give the road its rights. And one of the rights of the road is to do Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahy anil Munkar, yeah. If you see, I don't know, some sort of crime going on or something bad happening, it's your duty to stop that.
Good, yeah. And I suppose that's it. So Islam, Islam gives society a sense of balance, right, between the different values that you seek to live fulfilled lives. The problem in a capitalist world is that the only value that is often given precedence is the material value.
Cash.
And so everything falls by the wayside, right? All of it, until it gets to the point where those other values are corrupted. Today, you are only moral if you can earn something through it. If you can't earn something through it, money for it, morality goes out the window, right? Today, you are only spiritual if you can monetize your spirituality, right? So,
boy, give examples of that. That sounds crazy.
Well, just think about, yoga is a form of spirituality. Okay, we can debate that, right?
Okay.
But it's a Hindu form of spirituality, right? Today, yoga came about because it was this sort of this idea of balance between body and mind and the rest of it, right? Today, if you think about yoga and how it's practiced, it's a commodity. It's on YouTube. It is a way to earn money, right? So, and unfortunately, the Muslim community isn't immune from that. I remember once there was a seminar, how do you monetize da'wah, right? Which is highly problematic. Which is highly problematic, right?
Yeah.
You have a duty, as part of your duties to make da'wah, and when money comes into it, you corrupt it, right? So, a Muslim has a sense of balance. He knows when it's right to make money, and when it's completely unacceptable to make. Those Muslims who set up mosques all over the West, they don't do it largely to make money. They do it because they have a sense of service towards the Muslims in their community.
So going back to the question of Elon Musk and liberalism, you're saying he may have ended up in a similar position if he was living in an Islamic context. Sure. However, he may not have, because maybe his goals wouldn't have been so obsessed with money kind of thing.
Yes. Yeah.
However, you could say as well, like, once he sold PayPal he didn't need to work another day in his life, but he chose to do Tesla and SpaceX to actually have an impact on the world. And it's that thing, like, obsessed with legacy. Like, I want to live on after I die. I want to live on through this thing I made. So it's like, I guess, debatable whether that would have.
I suppose you have to think about who his dominant consumer would be in a Muslim society. Because if it's Muslims that are consuming it, then Muslims would also hold him accountable based on his actions. So if he's not giving zakat, or if he's doing all these things that are against Islam, but just to make that money, then his consumer base would boycott him way more than his consumer base boycott him now, because now he's got that variety of different customers to appeal to. Like the spectrum in America, for example, which is going to be the dominant consumer, is going to range from the people that support what he does to the people that hate what he does, the people that admire him, the people that don't. But if you've got a really like-minded sort of populace of people who, in this case, are Muslims who practice Islam, then they're going to be like, well, if he's not abiding by certain things that we abide by, then actually, do we even want his products? Do we even want to see that flourish in this society? And then he kind of gets excommunicated in that way, at least financially or economically.
And you could, I guess, argue as well I don't know details of this, but to make the batteries, they got to go to these salt mines in, I think, South America, and maybe you do irreversible damage over there. And so these are things, obviously it's not at the forefront of a Muslim's mind, but ideally it would be, right?
Well, certainly so. I mean, we want to make sure that what they call ecological balance is maintained. And if capitalism for the last 200 years has created immense imbalance in the ecology, to the point now that reputable scientists are saying that we are now this is irreparable, right? Things are moving in a disastrous direction. Islam thinks deeply about these things and maintains, as I said, this balance. I mean, back to the point you mentioned about Elon Musk. So even if Elon Musk sold PayPal, right, there isn't, as far as I know, right, there's a debate among scholars as to what it means to have excessive wealth. Okay. The opinion I follow after studying, this idea from the scholars who've looked at muamalat and economics is that excessive wealth is actually haram wealth, right? Is when you start to utilize your wealth in illegal means, right? So according to that opinion, to seek, even if you're comfortable in life, to seek more wealth is in itself not a problem, right? In the same way, like all things, if you want to do more of it, that's in Islam, generally speaking, that's not a problem to you as a Muslim. However, we have rules in place that say that he has to pay zakat. If he invests or he invests that wealth. We know the famous hadith about the orphans, right? The orphans' money should be invested so that it doesn't get cut away in zakat, right? So when the author is not of age, right? So we know from that a Muslim has two options. Either they keep that wealth and that it goes in zakat, or they invest it. When they invest it, that circulates in the real economy. Yes. The problem in the world today is that wealth is not circulating because there's no incentive to circulate wealth. Wealth is being hoarded and
getting the interest on it, yeah.
Right, or worse still, wealth is being invested in the derivatives market, in the equities market, right, which has no social value at all. This is just gambling for the refined, right? Middle class gambling, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And so what you end up having is wealth that circulates. There's a journalist in the West called Polly Toynbee. She said wealth has become so elusive, so far away, we don't even know it exists anymore. You only know it exists when you read the Financial Times wealth supplement every month, right? And that's where you realize, all right, there are people out there who've got private islands and private yachts, and they live in a complete different universe to 95% of the world. And that is a problem. That's where excessive wealth becomes a problem.
Got you, yeah. So what about, like, we talk about, trending topic like Elon Musk. What about just phones, right? Smartphones, whatever. How does liberalism work in relation to that? How does does liberalism promote smartphones, or does smartphones promote liberalism, or
Right.
Because like what you're saying is like, yeah, probably, right? But how does that even work?
Culture comes from ideology, right? So ideology comes first, and then cultures come along to convey, to add, to refine by ideology. Just think about, for example, you go to the Blue Mosque, right? You go to the mosque in Istanbul, right? You find that the architect behind the mosque, Sinan, I think it was, the architect behind the mosque, have you noticed when you walk into the masjid, you have this very confined space followed by an expansive space, and there's nothing in between, right?
Yes.
His thinking was that the way you incite the religious instinct of an individual is you go from small to big. When you're in a small space and then you suddenly see an expansive space, everything behind you is forgotten and you're in awe. Imagine, I don't know if
he
you
went
guys,
deep. He went deep.
I don't know if you guys go to football matches, right? It's not my thing, right? But I'm told that when they walk into Wembley Stadium, they're in awe of just the feel of this expansive space, right? So there must be something there, right or wrong. There must be something there, right?
Yeah.
So this sort of, we can say architecture reflected, the dome reflected acoustics, right? In society, in early modern societies, right? So the culture reflects the ideas of that society. In the same way, the culture of the West reflects those ideas. So the mobile phone is a really good example. Now, it doesn't mean the mobile phone wouldn't be utilized by Muslims. Of course, we would, right? But the mobile technology reflects today individualism writ large, right? Everyone today now has their mobile phone in their hands, right? And they live in their own world and they consume their own culture, which is tailored to them because of the algorithms that
what they
sell
personally
products.
want. Yeah.
Right. And it's got to a point where, I mean, I met a brother who said to me that, and from the outside, his brother lives a very nice community life. And he said to me, look, I have, I don't know, 4 daughters. I hardly see them. One is in this room, the other is in this room, and they're all just in their phones, right? We don't even have dinner together anymore.
Yeah.
Why? Because that reflects an individualism that is prevalent in these societies, right? So the mobile phone, in a way, has become a carrier for ultra individualism and consumerism. Of course, you are the product when you go on Twitter or Facebook. Your data is the product, as they say. And so when you're scrolling through and stop at a particular intersection on Twitter, the algorithm is saying, okay, this is what you're interested in. Let me sell you a product, right?
Yeah.
So I would say that ultra consumerism could only really have been enabled through the smartphone. And then take aside that the father has no value anymore, the mother has no value anymore, your siblings have no value anymore. You have now got a captured consumer, right? In the old days, whenever I want to buy something, I say to my wife, I want to buy something. She says, why do you need that? It's nonsense, it's rubbish, right? And by the end of it, I'm not buying it because, she's convinced me that it's not going to enhance my lifestyle.
Yeah.
That better plastic water container which has those really nifty lids aren't going to enhance my lifestyle. I've already got one, right? So they've convinced me. But in ultra individualistic societies, you no longer need that, right?
What you're saying is you don't consult people around you. You're actually vulnerable, right? So it's not me and my family against the marketer, right?
Yes.
Or the marketing team.
Yes.
It's just me on my own against the marketer who's got like all this psychographic data and all of that. So you're vulnerable, basically.
But then you also have got that influence that is tailored, is biased towards the marketer, because you're also surrounded online by people that are like you as an individual. You'll have people that you interact with more online that are more similar to you than your partner is similar to you or your family is similar to you, because even within the family, there's going to be so much difference. Like I'm not into the same stuff that my sister is or whatever, but I definitely interact with people online that are way more similar to me, maybe than they are to my family. It make when you touched on the individualism in action, it reminded me of a feeling that I felt. So down in Brighton, where I live, or generally speaking, I've always grown up, especially when I started practicing as an individual Muslim. So not necessarily in touch with a community of Muslims, not necessarily in touch with, even ethnically speaking, not even in touch with any Arabs or North Africans or whatever. Yeah. What I realized is, because of that, I practiced Islam through individualism. Okay, and I was very. I was extremely passionate through that, and that became part of my identity. And what I realized is when I'd go to Tunisia, when I'd go back to North Africa, or when I'd be amongst a lot of other Muslims, the spark lessened so much for me. Even the passion would go a bit. And I remember even being in Tunisia and thinking, this is really weird. It was a really weird feeling being surrounded by Muslims, because on paper you'd think, oh, of course, you'd be practicing way more. You'd be, super enthralled about being surrounded by Muslims. And actually, I realized it was less. I feel like my iman was lower when I was surrounded by more Muslims, because I didn't have the lens of individualism to practice my faith through. I couldn't say to my colleague, well, this is who I am. I'm Muslim and this is what I follow, etc. When you're surrounded by Muslims all over, because you're practicing it in the wrong sort of lens, you realize, actually, I'm not as individual as I thought I was. What I have this passion for is actually followed by so many other people, that you don't feel like an individual anymore. And because of that, it's almost like your identity is threatened in a particular way. I don't know if you've got any comment on that, or if that's sort of...
I think it's a very profound point. I completely agree. And I find myself, think about the rules of Islam of Silatul Rahim, right? Looking after your relatives, or honoring your guests, right? Or looking after your neighbors. These are rules that force a person, even if he has an inclination towards being an individual, to embrace community and society, right? Now, of course, we're going to embrace it at different levels, right? But nevertheless, we have to do that, right? Whereas when a lot of us in the West, we've adopted Islam without testing or contesting some of these ideas like individualism and equality and freedom. And so when we view Islam and the rules of Islam, it is very foreign to a Muslim who lives still in Muslim societies, where, for example, when I go to Pakistan, I'm odd, right? Straight away, I'm odd. I would think myself to be, a different person, but I'm odd because I found a lot of, when I went to Pakistan, I challenged a lot of my understanding of what it means to be a Muslim, right? Because just the way they live as a community, and what I saw as interference, what I saw as, look, these people are nosy, but it leads to better societies. And psychologists talk about this, that when you live in communities and you've got people around you and you're in constant engagement with people, you are less likely to have mental health problems, right? Individualism destroys. I mean, just think about these young men and women who are now consumed by their smartphones. They are the saddest people, the most miserable people. If you look at these surveys, the British teenager is the most miserable teenager in the world, and I see that with my students. And subhanallah, I feel a lot of empathy for and sympathy towards these people. So back to your point, individualism has to be proactively challenged, and a way to do that is to really think about those aspects of Islam that may not be fara'id, by the way. They may, maybe honoring your guests, most of it is just a sunnah, right? Or just a sunnah, right? It's not but you've got to force yourself to adopt those traditions, because we have not conveyed those traditions from generation to generation.
Yes.
My father was dislocated from his community. Colonialism and a weak economy in India pushed him to travel a lot of his younger life across continents, and he finally ends up in Britain. He's disconnected from his community, right? He's now making of the world what he can.
Yeah.
The next generation is going to be further disconnected from those qualities you really acquire by living in an Islamic society, right?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm going on a bit, but just to pronounce the point, in Istanbul, you get a lot of Westerners who come to Istanbul and they still live like Westerners. And I think I sometimes look at myself and think, am I one of those people, right? Where they may go to an Islamic society because they want to live in an Islamic or a society which is more Islamic, obviously not ideal, but more Islamic. But their traits, their qualities, our qualities are still very wedded in sort of Western individual culture.
Yeah, and last episode we were talking about this concept of ikram al-dayf, like hosting guests and all that.
Right.
And we were talking about this. I came across some people like inviting people over, and when they come, they give them like disposable plates and they give them food that they bought in the shop.
Yes.
Okay, and it links into what you're saying about productivity, because it's like, okay, me as the woman, for example, hosting these people, I'm thinking like, I'm busy, I need to be productive. So let me buy the plates and get the disposable one so I don't have to wash it. And then let me buy the food so I don't have to make it. So according to liberalism, that's the best way, right? But according to Islam, we are saying there is value in honoring the guests. There is ajr in honoring the guests. Yes. So on one hand, from a liberal point of view, you say there is no point, there's no value to making food yourself and give it to them on your best plates. No value at all. But in Islam, we say, well, there's ajr, and ajr is everything. Even if it's just ajr, that's enough to justify it. Because we don't want to maximize our like pounds per hour. We want to maximize our ajr per hour, if you like. And that's like the lens that we justify it through.
And then we tie into that rizq and all of the things that inhibit a person from honoring their guests and from spending money on their family because they fear for their. We don't have such problems, right? We truly believe in rizq. We say to ourselves that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will provide. Allah is the sustainer.
And replace it with something better, etc., etc. Yeah.
Yes.
And then nobody, decrease their wealth through sadaqah, etc. Even like this typical cliche kind of thing of, oh, my wife wants this and that, and I don't want to spend on her. But the Prophet ﷺ, he said, one of the best charities is to provide for your wife and kids.
Yes.
So it's like you can even in your mind you can even say, I'm going to buy my wife that thing. I think it's useless. Yeah, I think it's stupid, but I'm going to buy it for her just because she values it, and I actually expect reward from Allah for that because it's a sadaqah. Even though it's my wife, it's still a sadaqah, and Allah will, reward me for that. So definitely 100%. And going back to the whole individualism thing, with the smartphones, it's like, I'm on. It reminds me actually of when my dad used to make me go. I think when my mum is going to another city or whatever, he used to make me go with her, all right? Because he's like mahram and this and that, right? And I'm like, what the hell, man? Like, I'm not gonna be productive, right? I'm not thinking about that because I'm, for example, 11, 12, whatever in my head, I'm not thinking it in that way, but I'm thinking, what's the use? Like I'm not gonna benefit, right? And I'm thinking, well, what's my mum gonna get out of me being there as well, right? No benefit. But or even when we're going to visit guests, right? Or we're going to be guests, we're going to visit someone's house. Again, I might not know the kids there. I might not be friends with them. I'm going to be sitting like this and just like watching the clock, But, and then again, if we go to the equation or the criteria for, as liberals, we'll be like, yes, as an individual, I lost out on like my liberty, if you like, and I didn't enjoy myself because, again, like hedonism and seeking pleasure is ultimately part of liberalism, right? And so there's absolutely no point in sitting down having dinner with my family or going to visit family friends or going to escort or whatever my mum to wherever. There's no value in it, and so of course we're gonna just do whatever I want. What I want, that's all it's about. It's crazy. Now, what about this whole thing, which you mentioned in passing when I was sitting with you a few week or whatever ago, about fast food being linked to liberalism? How does that work?
I mean, that's an interesting discussion. And again, in an Islamic society, are we going to have? Of course, we will, right? This is just a sign of the times, and fast food is one of those things now that, like it or not, people have embraced, right? When did fast food come along? Fast food. So McDonald's was really the trailblazer when it comes to fast food. And McDonald's, what they did is the founders of McDonald's were very meticulous as to how to transit the raw material to a finished product in the quickest amount of time, to the degree that they plotted out the kitchens, they plotted out the workers, and everything was mechanized almost, right? Why? Because early 20th century American society was becoming, was economically rising, was becoming a deeply consumerist society, and it was a way of dealing with the gap that existed, where your food was crunching into, was eroding your personal time, and that's making you less productive, right? So fast food comes out of that type of environment where, time is money. I remember I once went into one of those vase shops, because I fancied myself as being like this guy who would buy a vase from a Turkish Istanbul, so cultured, right? So I asked the guy, who was behind the counter, I said to him, when do you close, right? Because that was my bargaining, it was a way of haggling with things. Like if it's next hour, I've got him, right? That's my capitalism coming through, unfortunately. So I say, all right, so when do you close? He looks at me, and he looks through me, by the way, for what I was, right? And he says, for you in the West, time is money. For me, time is time. Right. And that was his answer, right? And it was a bit,
he dropped a philosophy class on you.
Yeah, absolutely. But, it's the thinking, I suppose, was that, don't try this with me, right? I'm not one of those guys who, you need to try this sort of, for me, time is time, right? You want to sit here and talk to me, and you want to, let's come to an amicable thing, but don't sort of try these sort of techniques on me to try to get me to lower. I suspect I ended up not lowering. He sold it to me for probably overpriced, because I just felt so bad about. What was the point I'm making? The point I'm making is that when it comes to I must say, I'm sorry, I forgot your question.
The question is about fast food, McDonald's, time is money,
Right. So now think about that in an Islamic society, right? Now, of course, I'm not saying you wouldn't have this, right? But, we have a different way of thinking about community and life. Food is more than just getting something done with the shortest amount of time. Food is often the way by which you mix and you develop lines of communication and converse with people, right?
You even serve people.
Right. Well, exactly. All of this contributes to the bettering of the development of community. So I suspect this wouldn't be the most dominant aspect of our culture, right? It would be there, like all things will be there, right? But it wouldn't be, because people value different things. And you have this movement in the West to slow down, right? Because there is a recognition that this culture destroys the mind. It destroys societies.
Minimalism, all of that is trend,
Well, exactly. And that trend of minimalism, that's another Jordan Peterson extreme, right? Because it's like, ultra consumerism is to hoard everything and to have every inch of your room full of products. So minimalism now becomes the antidote, sort of the antidote to consumerism.
And then it becomes, how do I monetize minimalism?
That's right.
Yeah, so McDonald's, you're saying that, and by the way, I'm a big fan of McDonald's because of what you're talking about.
Right.
Like the way that they are so efficient, it's amazing. It's actually genius,
Right.
They plot the kitchen out, so it's like, I guess part of this comes from, was it Henry Ford, who was the one who revolutionized the manufacturing process. He's like, look, I don't want one guy to make a car and do all the parts. I want one guy to just turn one screw again and again and again. Like, that's the most efficient way of doing it. And that's what McDonald's did to burgers. Like, they're like, look, one guy is just gonna like do the sauce or whatever it is, right? Or they even, when they train you, they're like, look, you need to assemble a Big Mac in 60 seconds. Otherwise, we can't do this. It's not gonna work for us. Yes. And they standardize everything. Everyone's specialized, and they also want to make it so that the dumbest guy on earth can make a burger. So that the model is copy pastable, like the franchise thing, right? So you're saying basically that McDonald's became so big because time is money. People, people like it's the whole thing of mom's working now, so mom's not cooking. So let's take advantage of that and sell the burger, and it's cheap as well, right?
Yeah.
Because it's so standardized, so efficient, and so I guess full of rubbish as well.
Well, exactly.
So you're saying that without liberalism we wouldn't have falafel, because then I'm kind of leaning towards liberalism, to be honest.
Well, I don't know enough about falafel to contradict your point. But what I would say is that, without liberalism, I'll give you an example. I interviewed an Ottoman historian, Yaqub Ahmed, who's based in Istanbul, and he talked about. I asked him, why is it that the Ottomans didn't industrialize, right? And I copy and pasted the usual arguments that some Ottoman scholars thought it was haram, right? This machinery and whatever, this is unacceptable in Islam. He said, well, that may have been there, but that wasn't the dominant reason. He said, because people felt industrialization would destroy the way they viewed their communities, right? The way they made things, the artisans, the product development, that involved the community, it involved families. Industrialization takes all of that out, right? And you end up going to a city and going to a factory, and you're working for someone that you probably don't even know, right? Earning right. So industrialization, and so they were very wary of trying to have a society that looks like Europe in a sort of culturally Islamic society, right? And so the point I'm making is that we would be very careful about how we emulate others, and whether that emulation is going to be the betterment of our society or to the detriment. Now, of course, probably it was a big mistake for the Ottomans not to industrialize, right? I'm just giving the reason why they didn't. Yeah. But in the same way, artificial intelligence or whatever new comes down the line, Muslims have a culture, and we need to make sure that that culture that comes from Islam is not eroded by, we embrace it, of course, we're allowed to embrace it, but it doesn't erode our way of our sense of what it means to live as a community. Yeah. And I guess AI also comes from the idea that we must be more productive and all of that, right? Okay, let's wrap up with this current happenings, right, with Taliban, right? So you were saying that people are judging whether, Taliban kind of taking over Afghanistan, whether it's good or bad based on like liberal worldview. How is that happening? My first thing to say about the Taliban is, do I agree with everything they do and say? No, I don't, right? Do I think a lot of what they say is highly problematic? Possibly, right? Especially in their first iteration before the war, right? But what I disagree with them on is different probably to what a lot of liberal-minded people disagree with them, right?
Yes.
So for example, when we measure the Taliban, we have to be careful and say, is the Taliban encroaching Islamic ahkam sharia, or are they eroding what we've implicitly accepted as being liberal principles, right? And if they're eroding Islamic sharia, we've got to call them out. We've got to say, this is not acceptable, right? So for example, there's a well-known principle that a government is not allowed to ban the mubah, even if the mubah is distasteful, unless the mubah, the allowable, raises to a level of real harm that you can prove, right? When the Taliban were in government, they banned lots of the mubahat, right? Because they thought it was bad for Muslims, right? Now, I would say that's a problem, right? Because by doing that, if you do that to such a level, you estrange people from Islam. You actually push them away from Islam. So you've got to be, at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, you had different types and different grades of Muslims who had different ways of doing things, right? And you've got to be a little bit more sensitive towards that, right? However, the way that Muslims are automatically condemning the Taliban, it's based on this consensus that the Taliban are misogynists, and they're going to, now they're going to clamp down on women, and they're going to do, not going to allow equality, and they're going to now, some of that stuff may even be valid from an Islamic perspective, right? We may have a problem with that. I mean, I met a very good Muslim, very practicing Muslim from Afghanistan, and he said to me that, he would find it difficult to live he was there at the first Taliban government, he and his family found it very difficult to live in that type of society. Not because he's Western, not because he's liberal, but because the way it impacted his life was too harsh. It was too much, right? It didn't reflect the Medinan society at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, or the time of the Sahaba, where the society wasn't like that. You didn't have a secret state all right. So what's my point? My point is we have to be very careful in aligning ourselves to both positions, right? I have a problem with Taliban. The problem is it's the deal it made with China. It made a deal with China 2 weeks back, where the foreign minister met with the Taliban foreign minister, and they agreed that Taliban will have a policy of non-interference when it comes to the Uyghur issue. They're not gonna have, and in fact, it seems that the Taliban is going to work with the Chinese against the Uyghur militant groups that exist in China. I have a problem with that, right? I think that's a policy which really is fundamentally against the ethos of Islam and Islamic politics, right? That's different to whether some of the other things that people are calling the Taliban out for, which I would say, for example, you shouldn't have relationships out of marriage or something like that, right? We as Muslims, we have no problem with that. We think that is a valid ideal that probably an Islamic government should be highlighting. Right?
Even I heard, don't know if this is fully true. I mean, it's hard to know these days, but I heard that they told all the female government admin staff that their kind of services were no longer required. And it's a big, bold thing to do, right? But you could say, look, there's loads of men who are not employed, and they should take priority because their duty to provide, right? So we should prioritize that. So I'm not saying right and wrong, because obviously this is kind of a fiqhi matter, but I'm just saying that according to liberal standards of equality and this and that, that's unspeakable, and you can't even consider that. But from an Islamic point of view, even if it's wrong in the end, it's something you could consider, if you know what I mean, because we have certain priorities laid out in a way.
I think maybe my observations are not necessarily from what they're doing or what they've said they're going to do. I mean, what they say they're going to do and what people accuse them of doing often don't match up, and whether what's true and what isn't. But I think it's just the idea that I'm more intrigued with is this idea of Sharia now, today, in action. It feels like I tweeted about this, but I didn't know how much how willing are practicing Muslims of this day and age to actually live under Sharia, and what does that even look like? Because I think people have raised the standards of a Shari'i government so high that it wouldn't even if they were living under the Ottomans, which were the last caliphate or whatever, they wouldn't have even liked that, because there would have been so many mistakes there, because they're human, because they're the last line of many others, and the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam rightly said that the best of people the first, and then those that came after, and then those that came after. So there's going to be a steadily decline based on compared to the Rashidun. So is there gut reaction against the Taliban? Is there gut reaction against Sharia in today's modern age? And where do you draw the line between we don't want Islam, or this Sharia that you're bringing isn't right because you've made this mistake and that mistake and this mistake? Well, how far do we go? What's our allowance of mistakes to happen before we say, oh no, actually this is wrong? Because I feel like a lot of people are, I think a lot of the gut reaction is people want to have the freedom to sin when they feel like sinning. Okay, honestly, because when you live in a society where you're in charge of your iman. Okay, today my iman is high, so I'm going to practice my faith. Tomorrow my iman's not that great, so I want to go to a shisha bar, or I want to do this, whatever it is, right? Yeah. When you're in control of that, it's all, great, and I'm going to practice my faith in the West, and that's fine, because as long as us three together, we're practicing our faith today and we speak about it without any sort of state intervention, then we're happy. We can make those choices, because
that when I jump off...
When I jump off this stream, I can put on my Netflix or I can put on whatever, and I can watch whatever I want, and you don't have to know. However, when you live in a society that either promotes righteousness and it really minimizes the ability to do harm or commit sin, then suddenly you're like, oh, I don't like that. And I feel like that's a gut reaction from some people. It's like they don't want the inability to commit sin.
Bro, you went deep, to be honest, bro, because that sounds so accurate, man. Like that's like liberalism really infecting the mind. Like I will worship Allah the way I want, for example. Like I think we talked about this before. Like I want to worship Allah through da'wah. So I'm gonna like neglect these things that are maybe a bigger priority because no da'wah like that. But in the end, they've chosen to make da'wah that thing that they want to do, even at the expense of other things that are more important, right? Or I want to provide for my family the way I want, in the job that makes me happy. In the end, that's like individualism, isn't it? And it's like chasing pleasure rather than putting that above your duty. So and then that goes to the worship and all that you mentioned. And then it's like when you live in a community where people are holding you to account, people are seeing what you're doing, there isn't so much private time, right? A lot of stuff is more public, either in the family setting or in the community setting. And then it's like, okay, I've got to always kind of, your standard for how low you can go comes up a bit, doesn't it? And that, I think that you could say Islam is designed like that, right? To help each other, to keep a level high.
We ultimately have to see these sort of situations, and not using Taliban as an example, but any sort of hypothetical situation. We have to position our minds in a way that, yes, living in this society, there's going to be a lot of things that I like doing that I can't do anymore, and I need to like that. I need to like that the state or the society or the government has now blocked away these harmful things for me, which without it, I always dip in and out of. Like, we make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to rid us from these certain vices or keep away these particular temptations for us. But then when they are actively taken away from us, we aren't happy because we want the choice. We want the temptation in a way.
I want to stop it because I chose to stop it.
And it's
not
like
because you stopped me doing it.
On a minimal scale, it reminds me of your whole... I remember you did that thing about you put all these barriers in the way of screen time, like these automatic things these checks and balances of your screen time. For example, you're on the computer too long, it shuts you off, right? But some people say, I use my phone too much, I don't want to, I need to stop. But then you put in some sort of outside agency I said it myself, didn't I? I said, I can't deal with that kind of stuff. I really want to stop using my phone, but no, I can't go that far to actually have some outside thing that stops me using my phone when I want to use it. And it's like, well, you can't have your cake and eat it, Yes, humans are weak, and there's a certain level of self-control that they can have without an outside force saying, hey, let me help you out there and get that away from you. Then we start protesting.
it seems to go like straight to the heart of liberalism, the liberty element of liberalism, really. And you reminded me of the ayah. It's in, Surah Al-Hajj, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَعْبُدُ اللَّهَ عَلَى حَرْفٍ, right? They're like on the edge. فإن أصابه خير أطمأن به وإن أصابته فتنة انقلب على وجهه خسر الدنيا والآخرة ذلك هو الخسران المبين. So it's like there are some people, they worship Allah على حرف, on the edge, and if something good happens, then they're happy with it, and if a fitna happens, something bad happens, then they fall on their face. And then Allah says, خسر الدنيا والآخرة, they lost the dunya and the akhirah. ذلك هو الخسران المبين. And if I'm not mistaken, khusran is like the most, the worst form of the word khasr, like loss, is the big ultimate loss. So you kind of made me think of that, because it's like you're worshipping Allah based on the kind of feeling in the moment, and there's nothing like holding you up there. And that seems to be a trend when it comes to liberalism. It's purely based on feeling in the moment kind of thing.
But that's certainly what it's been reduced to. I think liberalism was far more complex and detailed in its early...
Like the libertarian version of it, if
right.
you like. Yeah.
Liberalism has now just become, as you said, it's about pleasure and pain and consumer society. And that's led to very shallow and superficial societies. I mean, see, the original idea of liberalism was to create sort of high-level thinkers in society, where all of society thinks in a particular way. But what we've seen in recent years is the opposite, right? People are And that's probably down to consumerism, and it's down to superficiality, it's down to culture, and sort of the type of culture which is dominant in these societies and what sells, and all of that has contributed, I think, to a type of society which is very, very low level, very unthinking,
dumb down.
It's a dumbed down society, and you see generation after generation, it's getting worse, right? But where people cannot even make decisions for themselves. However, the problem with liberalism is that it convinces you, right, that and the marketers do a great job of this, that your opinion is valid. In fact, your opinion is more valid than those who spent years studying that opinion, right? And back to a point Muhammad made earlier, we've sort of like taken that dominant idea into the way we view Islamic fiqh, right? So you and I, the three of us, would say we have limits, right? We're probably all muqallideen, and we study Islam, but we're not going to be able to issue judgments, right, from the text. So we know that there is a need for expertise. But in today's world, that medium, that thing has disappeared, right? So everyone is an expert. Everyone has an opinion. I know a controversial point, but everyone has an opinion about vaccines. Everyone has an opinion about, about COVID. Everyone has an opinion about every single issue, right?
Yeah.
And not only that, you can make millions on YouTube spouting an opinion which you have no expertise over. Like, you get these guys who, how to be rich or whatever, right? They've got no real expertise, whether life or study. But because their opinion is as valid as anyone else's opinion.
Because they package the opinion well.
And that is the worst aspect. It comes from this sort of Greek philosophy of Socrates, where as long as you can argue something in an eloquent way, that's why democracy fell in ancient Greece, by the way, because what they found was that in the forums where the members got together, it was the one who could convince, use great language, was the one that convinced the masses. The mob went with that guy, right?
Yes.
And I think that's what society has become, and America is just exhibit A when it comes to that type of society.
SubhanAllah. The Thinking Muslim, that's the podcast, that's the website. And what about, so thinkingmuslim.com is the website?
Yeah.
And where else can people find what you're up to, inshallah?
Well, I think principally Thinking Muslim, we've got some social media channels which I tend to sort of use and not use but you can log on to Thinking Muslim is our Twitter handle. My own Twitter handle is Jalalain, so you can contact me on Twitter.
Solid one.
But yeah, listen to the podcast, and I would advise. I would say it'd be great to get your feedback from your listeners. To be honest, my podcast, I know that there are lots of things that I have very little knowledge about, and so the idea really is to get those who have some knowledge in those areas, to contribute their understanding, and I think that type of thinking and mindset needs to return to the Muslims, where we know our limits and we know to have
go back to those that know,
go back to those who know, right? But to question them, to have our own mind, but of course to be aware of knowledge and the need and necessity for knowledge,
and get learn how to think, basically. That's why it's Thinking Muslim, right? Okay, cool. So I'll link those stuff at the bottom, inshallah. By the way, what Jalalain, what is that reference to? The Jalalain, the tafsir, or what is it?
Well,
or is the two of you, or what is it?
Well, that's a good question. So that's very perceptive of you. No one's ever asked me that, because Jalalain, of course, is the tafsir of two Jalals, right?
Yeah.
No, it isn't. But every other Twitter handle was taken, so I thought, okay, this is probably going to be quite a.
Maybe it's like there's two versions of you in your head, and you're like
the good guy, and the bad guy. Yeah.
Jekyll and Hyde. Yeah, exactly. Who wrote the tafsir? I know it's Suyuti, and what's the other one? Razi?
I think so. Yes, you're right. Suyuti is obviously the famous one.
Yeah, he's the one that finished it off after the first one
Yeah, I can't.
I think it was Al-Razi, maybe. Yeah. He started it and then it's finished. Okay, great. This really, I know this is kind of a bit of a deep one, a bit of a geeky one, but I don't know. I enjoyed it, so inshallah people enjoy it.
It's like the academic culmination of 120 whatever Mind Heist episodes. It is, honestly.
But inshallah, we did kind of dumb it down a little bit, inshallah.
No, I enjoyed it a lot. Barakallahu feek. Thank you for coming on, Jalal, and hopefully
thanks, Jalal.
we have you on in the future.
inshallah. Yalla, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Check out the links in the description and all of that. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.